I'm Mike. This is MikeOnMedia. Why does the very thing that makes Superman good keep it from being great? Stick around to find out. Superman, released in July of 2025, was written and directed by James Gunn, stars David Corenswet as Superman/Clark Kent, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, and a complete ensemble of other notable cast members. In 2022, Warner Brothers Discovery handed over control of DC Studios to James Gunn and his longtime collaborator Peter Safran to do what's been described as a soft reboot of the DC universe. Superman is the first feature film of this DCU reboot. Because of these circumstances and the fact that Superman is in many ways the quintessential superhero, Superman was the most anticipated movie of the summer, if not all of 2025. With impressive visuals, healthy doses of CGI, good casting, and a story that tries but ultimately fails to achieve its impossible goals, Superman is a good but not a great movie. Skipping the retelling of Superman's origin story, the movie starts out at a point where Superman's been on the scene for 3 years. Additionally, the prologue explains that other metahumans, which are humans with superpowers, have been around for 300 years. In short order, the audience is introduced to Superman, his dog Krypto, who also has superpowers, and his secret base, the Fortress of Solitude, which is complete with a small contingent of robots who tend to his every need. Soon after, it's revealed that Lois Lane, portrayed by Rachel Brosnahan, has been dating Clark Kent. The portrayal of this relationship is interesting, is generally good, and it's a bit of a different take than the normal Superman story. What follows is a protracted struggle between good and evil, with the good being represented by Superman and his allies, mostly the Justice Gang, clearly a precursor to the Justice League, which includes the Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl. On the side of evil, we have Lex Luthor and his cohorts, which includes several metahumans, such as the Hammer of Baravia and Ultraman, which are two enemies that have very similar powers to Superman, as well as the Engineer, who is a woman that's been infused with nanotechnology such that she can transform herself into just about anything. Throw in Superman being involved in a war between the fictional countries of Baravia and Jarhanpur, the world questioning Superman's intentions, some kidnapping, technology and havoc related to multiple dimensions, and all kinds of plotting on the part of Lex Luthor, and you have just enough story to fill out the remainder of the 129-minute runtime. In terms of themes, you won't have to think about it too hard with this movie because Gunn has elected to have Superman just tell you the theme near the end of the movie.
Why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you selected?
Although it's not a guarded secret, I won't reveal it here so that you can have the full cinematic experience. Personally, I dislike it when writers decide to explicitly explain their movies in this way. I prefer that they adhere to the old writing advice of show, don't tell, and in other words, let the audience figure it out for themselves. David Corenswet makes for a very good Superman. He's likable and believable in the role. Now, because of the story, we don't see a whole lot of Clark Kent. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we don't get to see a lot of the contrast between Clark Kent and Superman. Nevertheless, Corenswet is a very good Superman. Nicholas Hoult also is noteworthy and very good as Lex Luthor. I like him a lot. Now, it's also true that characters are confined by their writing. And to be honest, I didn't love some of the writing around Lex Luthor, which diminished my view of the character in general. But that had nothing to do with Hoult's acting. In my opinion, Hoult delivers a very good performance. Now, I'm probably in the minority in that I never really liked Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor from the 1978 Superman. I always thought that was a strange casting choice. And in that sense, I think Nicholas Hoult is a much better Lex Luthor. Still not perfect, but very good. The decision not to retell Superman's origin story was also another excellent choice. To be honest, there's just very little to be gained by going over the origin story again, and there is potentially a lot to be lost in terms of A, possibly not doing it well, as was the case with Man of Steel in 2013, or B, just wasting time that could otherwise be used for developing the new story that you're telling. Out of curiosity, I went back and looked at Superman 1978 and Man of Steel to see how they dealt with the origin story. Interestingly, both of those movies are exactly 143 minutes long, and both of them don't have Superman on screen in costume until approximately the 48-minute mark. So in other words, there's a full 1/3 of the movie without Superman as Superman. In contrast, James Gunn has Superman on screen in costume from the very first scene. Again, I think that's an excellent choice. Visually, Superman is very good. Certainly there's a lot of CGI. Some folks have remarked that some of it looks a little, like comic books. Which is all good in my opinion. It's a stylistic thing. I think it's all done well. Looks very good. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's visually stunning, but it's very good. Another great decision, in my opinion, is the inclusion of Krypto, the dog. And to be honest, with Krypto appearing in the Superman comic books and people kind of universally loving dogs, I'm a little surprised that Krypto hasn't shown up in some way, shape, or form earlier. But I'm very glad that he's in this movie. And finally, I would also say that one of the strengths of this movie is the use of humor and comedy, a signature of James Gunn's writing. There are definitely some jokes and some sequences in this movie that are genuinely funny. Unfortunately, the weaknesses of this movie outnumber the strengths of the movie. So let's get into it. James Gunn had two goals with Superman. The first was to create a foundation for the DC Universe reboot. And the second, and I'm explicitly saying it's the second goal, was to tell a compelling Superman story. Now, the problem, of course, is that these goals are not mutually supportive. That is to say that creating the foundation for the DC Universe actually ends up detracting from telling a compelling Superman story. Can you imagine if Superman 1978 had included a bunch of metahumans and people from the Justice League or Justice Gang? Or can you imagine if Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins had done the same? Or on the Marvel side, can you imagine if Iron Man had done something similar? I suggest all of those movies would have been worse. And I also suggest that Superman actually is worse than it otherwise could have been. These choices, as well as some others, all serve to diminish Superman. In my opinion, telling a compelling Superman story should have been the first priority, and establishing the foundation for the DC Universe reboot should have been a distant second, or ideally not a priority at all. In the normal version of Superman, he's a one-of-a-kind superhero living on a planet of normal human beings. But in Gunn's world, he's the Johnny-come-lately metahuman living in a world that's been exposed to metahumans for over 10 generations. It's really kind of easy to imagine that if Superman weren't around, everything would just be fine. Now, more generally, I feel like there's some problems with the writing of Superman. But to put this into context, I will say that I was a big fan of the original Guardians of the Galaxy by Gunn. And when I saw that movie, I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. And the reason that I liked it was the writing. Now, I also like 2 and 3, but I will say that I felt like they never quite recreated the magic of the first one. But anyway, all that is to say that I've been an enthusiastic fan of Gunn's writing. But in the case of Superman, I feel like in some ways it's just missing the mark a bit. Now, I've heard people say that Superman is very much comic book-like as a compliment. And I agree that it is comic book-like, but I'm not sure that that's really, in this sense, a compliment. To me, it's just too fantastical. I mean, it's got, multiple dimensions. It's got the pocket universe. It's got metahumans. It's got the Justice League. It's got Ultraman. It's got the Engineer. It's got, different monsters. It's just too much. Now, maybe some of it could have worked, but altogether, it's just too much. And again, I feel like all these fantastical elements end up diminishing Superman. Now, relatedly, all the fantasy technology around Lex Luthor also is a bit of a problem, in my opinion, because it elevates him to this sort of super criminal, super villain level. But, I'm no comic book aficionado, but my understanding has always been that the thing that sets Lex Luthor apart was his intellect. And I feel like that's kind of getting lost in this caricature version of Lex Luthor from the movie. Another thing that I didn't really like, and I understand different people feel differently about this, is the thinly veiled reference to the Middle East in terms of the war with Bahravia and Jarhanpur. In my opinion, a lot of people go to the movies to kind of escape reality. And by having these thinly veiled references to real world events, it kind of sabotages the escape. So I would actually prefer that they just not do that. Another weakness that is actually a strength as well is the humor. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are legitimately some funny jokes and sequences. However, there are also a lot of other attempts at jokes and other sequences that are attempts at humor that are not funny. At least I didn't find them funny. So I wish that Gunn had been a little bit more judicious in his use of humor. And finally, there's a well-known practice of sort of rewriting existing backstory to fit a current story. It happens so much that there's a name for it, retroactive continuity, or retcon for short. Unfortunately, there's some of this going on with Superman's parents from Krypton. Now, I won't reveal it, but I will say that I really did not like it. To end on a happier note, here's a fun fact about Superman 2025. The dog Krypto was created based off of a CGI model that was generated from James Gunn's actual dog Ozu. In fact, the opening scene in which Krypto playfully attacks Superman was largely based off of a video of Ozu playing with Gunn's cat. Wrapping things up, Superman is a good introduction to James Gunn's rebooted DC universe, and it's a good but not a great Superman story. In terms of rating, I give Superman 3.5 out of 5 stars. In my opinion, you should see Superman, if for no other reason than just because it is arguably the most anticipated movie of 2025. I would encourage you to see it and to have an opinion about it. If you've already seen Superman, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree with my assessments? I'll look forward to reading your opinions. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Also, here's another video I think you'll like. This has been Mike on Media. Until next time, take care.